He does cringy comedy, and that's how we found him. And
So it's not
that
like-
is the relationship, you know. It's not like
he's unaware of that.
Right.
That's the whole purpose. He wants to be with us. He wants to interact with us, knowing that we're always just goofing on him. So why should I? That's the expectation he had coming in.
But it's all fine. It's all with good.
Yeah, it's with peace and love.
Yeah.
People in the chat were going like, "Get him out of there! Get him out of there!"
Yeah.
Pull him.
So we were reacting to that. I agree, it was super awkward, and honestly, we probably shouldn't have kicked him out. But this whole thing, he's just a poor old man, is so crazy. It's just so bad faith argument.
I genuinely don't understand how this could be a bad faith argument. In the video, I even tell people to watch it themselves and form their own opinion because it really speaks for itself, in my opinion. You know, while it helps to know that Twitch chat was encouraging you, I don't really think that changes the fact that you were a complete dickhead. Way more so than any of the episodes you did with him prior. Like, the tone was not lighthearted at all. I really do think it speaks for itself.
I mean, this criticism is just strange that I have notes.
Yeah.
I mean, why is that a criticism?
To me, it was pretty obvious I wasn't criticizing the fact that you had notes. It was that you stuck so closely to the script and did not care about what the people you were asking these questions were actually saying. You weren't playing off what they were saying. You were just continuing with what you wrote down. And I use this to refer to the JonTron and William Osman episodes to show instances where you clearly cared more so about following a script than you did about showing respect to your guests. And particularly with the Jimmie Lee episode, it shows some demeaning jokes that you prepared in advance. And when you had finished blasting through all the points on the script, you just decided to kick him out. You know, I think that's a very fair reason to bring it up.
We started having this back and forth with Jimmie Lee to the point where we actually collabed with him, which goes against your original claim, by the way, that I haven't collabed with any small YouTubers.
Yeah, I personally don't consider Jimmie Lee a YouTuber. He only has 8 public videos from before he went on the podcast. And yeah, I just considered him like more of an entertainer who uses YouTube to show some of his stuff. Like, would you call Bill Burr a small YouTuber? No. That's just my opinion.
You have to go watch the video I made with him. You don't understand. That is his existence.
It feels like you're just saying the reason you treated him like shit was that he's a kind of shitty guy and that you've always treated him like shit. You showed clips of his stand-up, just like you did on the actual podcast. The difference is when he's doing his stand-up, he's performing, okay? And on the podcast, he was talking to you like a very normal human being. And then you skipped over it, but the Dance Monkey Dance portion of that, you activated his Jimmie Lee mode, right? Just so that you could treat him like shit and kick him out. That reflects very poorly on your character, in my opinion, still. But again, that's a subjective thing, yeah, and I feel like I back that up at least a decent amount. Of course, it's nice to have your perspective on it, but yeah, I don't really think I'm totally in the wrong on having that perception.
I never had a problem with you, but I think people that watched it did, and some people said you're mean, and some people said I'm mean, and it was like catch-22.
Of course, Jimmie Lee wasn't that bothered by it. He seems like a very resilient man.
That I should 100% have given you your own episode.
Honestly, at the end of the day, like, I don't really care.
William Osman was similar in the sense that, of course, he doesn't actually care anymore. But I understand viewers like feel very sympathetic toward him after watching my video, so you just want to clear the air on that like there's no hard feelings. I understand that, but yeah, as far as it pertains to my arguments, it doesn't change them. I think honestly, this was my most reasonable chapter, where I'm basically saying you stuck too closely to the script, and it resulted in much worse podcasts where you treated people poorly, especially those who were lesser than you in notoriety.
The decision to not have me on longer probably stemmed from maybe not thinking that it would be like as interesting to the podcast audience, which I totally get. Like, as a content creator, you have to try to figure out what people want to see, because at the time it was a much smaller channel.
This pretty much goes completely in line with what I was saying in the video, that William got less time on the podcast because he was a small YouTuber. And I want to note that William did comment on the original video, and I did favorite his comment. And he more or less said the same thing here that he did in the comments, so it was not really a surprise.
At the time, though, it was maybe a little bit of a bummer to have not been included more, but that doesn't really, change the way like you guys have been nice to me, even like especially that day or after the fact.
And yeah, you apologize to William, he's going to be on the next podcast. That's epic. Good. I mean, it's a good outcome.
I don't know how you can watch this and then say I'm superior. I mean, I see the opposite. I don't see me being superior. I see me just being very insecure, which is what I was.
Oh yeah, and Bill Burr, I don't know if you purposefully, misinterpreted it, or I don't exactly know what was happening with that, but I felt like it was pretty obvious to display that Bill Burr was an example where you were not in your element because Bill Burr was above you, whereas William Osman and then Jimmie Lee were well below you, and so you treated them disrespectfully, whereas with Bill Burr, you know, suddenly you're all over the place, and your superiority complex shriveled up. I think I laid the case out pretty well, and there was a lot of points where the damning elements you just skipped right over, right? Like you extending the title after adding William's name, and this two-panel comparison between you talking to Jimmie and you talking to Bill Burr, skipping over it and not addressing it. While I understand, it makes you look a little bit like this is more of a defense than an honest reaction, which is the case. It's a defense, and that's fair. You're allowed to do that. I'm just allowed to also call you out on that. There were a handful of moments during the podcast where I would make, you know, what I assume Ethan registers as like a good point, and instead of addressing the point, he'll just address something stupid about it.
I know. Like
the guy was racist, that his jokes, that were clearly jokes, were racist. And then 5 minutes after
Bro.
the old guy leaves, he says this.
the old guy leaves.
for banning dabbing.
There it is.
That was a brutal dab. That was like a fucking jihad dab. That was like a fucking straight up Allah Akbar dab.
Here we go. We're going in slow-mo now.
Wind up.
Whoa!
That was a brutal dab.
Damn.
Wasn't that about how they banned dabbing in Saudi Arabia or some shit?
Remember?
That was a really brutal dab.
Dude, that's when the bombs go off.
I don't know if that's blatant deflection or if that's just how his brain copes with a good point being made against him that he wasn't prepared for, but it's really easy to undermine a good point by just like fully not acknowledging it and addressing some other like random distraction or like talking over it or skipping through it. But I do want to point it out because it does absolutely undermine what I'm saying.
Employee.
He
Ooh.
keeps referring to Dan too as an employee. If you've done your research, this is
Dan.
Dan.
goddammit.
Yeah, Hila, don't worry. I know who Dan is. I just pointed out that he was an employee to show his bias in your favor. Speaking of which, let's take a look.
I had seen one of the many follow-up videos that this guy has done.
I've only made 2 follow-up videos, and I think that both were very much warranted.
That was crazy.
Well,
just
Okay.
to full disclosure, like he's
Okay.
aware of that
Yeah.
is a false statement.
Hey, thanks for giving full disclosure, Dan.
That was crazy. This is a small point, but I do want to say, just because he keeps saying it, it was longer than 20 minutes.
Damn, Daniel, you said that with a lot of confidence. Let's take a look and see. Okay, so from the moment Williams introduced,
Beanie himself, William Osman, the owner.
we're 30 minutes and 47 seconds into the podcast. Then we can skip to the point where Ethan first signals for him to leave.
Anyway, thank you, dude. God bless. They really appreciate you coming out here.
Thank you.
At 50 minutes and 51 seconds, effectively ending his segment at 20 minutes and 4 seconds. He lingered, of course, until 54 minutes in, totaling his time on the podcast at 23 minutes and 13 seconds, if you want to get technical. But that whole portion of time, he did not seem very welcome at all. So I think it's very fair and correct to say that William only had 20 minutes.
So, again, for all of that research, it's just like kind of fudging the number.
Wrong.
Right
How
there.
long was it? Like 25 minutes?
I think it was a little bit longer than that even. It was close to a half hour. That was crazy. You're rounding down.
Wrong.
Yeah, to make it seem bad.
Look, I don't really care if you make a mistake so long as you like try and correct yourself after the fact as best you can. But if you're going to try and nitpick me on something as stupid as that, you'd better at least be correct. And this isn't the only moment where they try to discredit the video by pointing out something irrelevant. They're doing it throughout the whole thing.
I'm gonna be honest with you, dude. The sketches are pretty. Well, here, let me show you a little bit.
my brother is?
Oh shit, I forgot I had them. It's actually in my closet if you want to see them.
Okay. I keep people in my closet.
Yeah, that's what the sketches are like.
What? What are they like? Bro, if you have criticism for the skits, please just have the balls to say it, because giving this nothing criticism, like literally pointing out nothing wrong with it but implying there's something wrong with it, that's pretty cowardly. You know, if you don't like them, just say you don't like them. But if you're going to be honest and then not say anything, just to undermine an aspect of the video that's irrelevant to the criticism, I'm going to mention it. You know, if you're going to act like the gatekeeper of comedy, you'd better at least give me some decent feedback. In the podcast following
What was that? Why did he like started filming and didn't cut it out when he had food in his mouth? What happened to spending hundreds of hours editing?
This is kind of a funny nitpick, to be honest. Not only is that not at all an error, it was left in on purpose, but this is the equivalent of me pointing out that you have like a quotation error in your video about Keemstar, and then trying to discredit the editing you put into the whole video.
You didn't cut the part where you were still chewing food? I gotta go back. Eating food in the beginning of this clip.
in the podcast.
Why didn't he cut that? He should have spent more hours editing.
I've got to say, I find it funny that Roberto Blake decided to put these timestamps and didn't even include William's cameo. I wonder if it's because William didn't defend Ethan well enough, and so it wasn't worth timestamping. When you look at it, all the timestamps are pretty much just the points that are the most favorable for Ethan. If you need any more proof that this is a defense video, you can thank Roberto.
你睇，曙光高啊！